The testicles of Oliver Cromwell, cut off and tossed to the ground, symbolized a punishment worse than death, a reminder that even the dead were not safe from vengeance. And at the heart of it all stood the man who ordered it, Charles II. Imagine it. England's most feared man, once a ruler who brought kings to their knees, now nothing more than a dangling corpse desecrated before jeering crowds. Cromwell's lifeless body was dragged from the grave, hanged, disemboweled, quartered, and humiliated in a grotesque carnival of revenge. The king who smiled through mistresses and masks had orchestrated it all. Charles II, the so-called Merry Monarch, did not merely want to rule. He wanted to rewrite memory. He wanted every man and woman in England to know that rebellion against the crown would not end with death, but with dishonor that stretched into eternity. This was not justice. This was theater, a performance of power staged with knives, ropes, and rotten flesh. It was monarchy reborn in blood, a grotesque resurrection that said, "Kings do not forgive, and kings never forget." But how did England arrive at this nightmare, where a corpse swinging from the gallows spoke louder than sermons? To answer, we must return to a boy who saw his father die, a prince without a throne, and the long, bitter road that turned him into a man who ruled through vengeance. Before we dive into Charles II's dark revenge, I need you to do something urgent. Hit subscribe to Histoeureka right now, or you'll miss the rest of this twisted saga. Drop a like, share this video, and comment your country below. Let's see how far this story of vengeance travels. The year was 1649. The axe fell on the neck of King Charles I, and the blade rang out like thunder across Europe. His head was held aloft, blood dripping, as the English people stared in stunned silence. In the crowd that day, though hidden far away, was the spirit of a boy who would never forget. That boy was Charles, Prince of Wales, just 19 years old when his father was executed. For Charles, the regicide was more than political. It was personal. He lost not only his father, but the divine right he believed flowed in his blood. He was not merely a boy without a father. He was a king without a throne. The new government, led by Oliver Cromwell and the Puritan Parliament, declared monarchy abolished. For the first time in its history, England was a republic. But for Charles, it was a betrayal carved into his very soul. He fled into exile, traveling from court to court across Europe, a king in name only, begging for allies and shelter. France, Spain, and the Dutch offered him glimpses of hope, but none would risk all-out war with Cromwell's England. As Charles wandered, Cromwell tightened his grip at home. He defeated royalist armies, crushed uprisings, and built a regime of strict Puritan rule. The theaters were closed, music banned, Christmas cancelled. Pleasure itself became a sin. Meanwhile, Charles lived off the charity of foreign monarchs, mocked as a penniless king. He gambled, chased women, and told jokes to mask the humiliation. But beneath the laughter, he carried a wound that festered with rage. Every letter from home reminded him of Cromwell's rule, his father's enemies now parading as heroes. Every rumor of Puritan sermons praising the Republic deepened his thirst for revenge. And yet, exile made Charles patient. He learned the art of waiting, of smiling at those who doubted him, of turning humiliation into charm. For survival in exile demanded not just courage, but cunning. He watched Europe's courts, learned the games of diplomacy, and quietly built a network of loyalists who still whispered his name. The boy who lost everything began to grow into a man who would take it all back. But when Charles returned, it would not be as the forgiving prodigal son. It would be as a king who had seen his father's head roll into a basket, a king who had sworn that blood would answer blood. Oliver Cromwell had risen from obscurity, a minor country gentleman turned soldier, into a figure feared across Europe. His armies were ruthless, his faith unyielding, his power unmatched in England. The monarchy was gone, the crown dismantled, the throne empty. Instead, Cromwell styled himself not as a king, but as Lord Protector, a title that cloaked monarchy in republican clothing. But his reign was no gentle protection. It was iron wrapped in scripture. Cromwell crushed dissenters, dissolved parliaments, and silenced those who dared challenge his authority. He became a king in all but name. To the Puritans, Cromwell was God's chosen instrument, purifying England of sin. To Royalists, he was a hypocrite drenched in blood, a traitor who had murdered their sovereign and stolen their birthright. Charles, in exile, read reports of Cromwell's wars in Ireland, campaigns marked by sieges, massacres, and towns left smouldering. Drogheda and Wexford became symbols of brutality. To Charles, they were unforgivable sins. But Cromwell was not content with victory. He wanted to erase the very memory of monarchy. The crown jewels were sold, royal palaces stripped, the bones of kings desecrated. Even the calendar was remade. Yet for all his might, Cromwell lived with paranoia. He knew royalists plotted abroad. He knew Charles lurked across the channel, a spectre waiting to return. The protector kept soldiers close and daggers closer, but no fortress can protect against time. In 1658, Oliver Cromwell fell ill. The Lord Protector, scourge of kings, lay sweating in Whitehall Palace as fever consumed him. He prayed, but his body betrayed him. On September 3rd, he died. The king-killer was gone. Bells tolled, sermons praised him, and Parliament buried him with pomp at Westminster Abbey. Cromwell was laid among kings in the very shrine of monarchy. For Charles, the news was a crack in the armor. The man who had slain his father was now in the ground. Yet Charles could not return. Cromwell's son, Richard, inherited power. The protectorate lived on. Richard, however, was no Cromwell. Weak, indecisive, mocked as Queen Dick, he could not command armies or silence rivals. Within a year, his authority crumbled. The republic that killed a king began to devour itself. Factions in Parliament quarreled. Generals muttered rebellion. The country groaned under taxes and austerity, and through the cracks, whispers spread. Perhaps the exiled king should return. Charles watched from The Hague as emissaries approached. His chance had come. England, tired of Cromwell's heirs, yearned for order, for stability, for the crown. The prodigal king was summoned home. But Charles would not return as a meek, grateful ruler. He returned with memory, with rage, and with a promise that those who betrayed his father would pay in flesh, even if that flesh had rotted in the grave. When Charles set foot in London in 1660, the city erupted in cheers. Flowers carpeted his path, bells rang, and crowds wept at the sight of their king restored. But behind the jubilation lurked fear. For the men who had signed Charles I's death warrant, the regicides, knew that the Merry Monarch's smile could not erase the axe's shadow. Retribution was coming. January 30th, 1661. The anniversary of Charles I's execution, the date chosen deliberately as if history itself demanded symmetry. The crowd pressed forward, eager for spectacle. From the Abbey crypt, soldiers dragged the bodies of Oliver Cromwell, Henry Ireton, and John Bradshaw, the king's murderers, now nothing more than corpses in coffins. Death had not saved them. The coffins were smashed open. The bodies, decayed and stinking, were yanked upright and chained. Rotten skin clung to bone, hair matted with soil. Some in the crowd gagged, others cheered. The corpses were hauled to Tyburn, the infamous gallows, where once thieves and rebels had been hanged. Now the dead themselves would swing, a macabre parody of justice. Executioners tied the corpses as if they still lived, ropes digging into rotted flesh. The gallows creaked. Then, before thousands of eyes, Cromwell's body was executed, hanged like a common criminal. 3 bodies swung in the wind, grotesque marionettes of vengeance. But Charles II wanted more than hanging. He wanted mutilation. He wanted a ritual to reverse his father's death. So the executioners cut them down and laid them out. Knives flashed, the corpses were sliced open, entrails spilling, the stench overpowering. The dead were quartered as if alive. The climax came when Cromwell's genitals were hacked off, held high, mocked and discarded in the filth. To the crowd, it was more than mutilation. It was castration of memory itself. Heads were severed, placed on spikes, and raised above Westminster Hall, the very place where Charles I had been condemned. Now Cromwell's face, blackened with decay, stared down at London. For decades his skull remained there, rain and wind gnawing at the flesh until only bone was left. A silent witness to royal vengeance, glaring at all who passed beneath. The people roared approval. Some spat at the corpses, others laughed, but beneath the theatre was a chilling message. Rebellion against the crown would be punished, even beyond the grave. Charles II did not need Cromwell's life. He needed his death repeated. He needed to rewrite memory, to show England that regicide was not justice, but sacrilege. The mutilation of Cromwell's corpse was not an act of barbarity alone. It was calculated political theatre, designed to terrify, to bind monarchy once more with divine, untouchable power. But vengeance rarely stops at the grave. The living regicides, those not already dead, faced the same fate in the flesh. Some fled across the seas, others were captured, dragged to trial. Executions filled the Restoration years. Men were hanged, drawn, and quartered. Their screams joined the memory of Cromwell's silence. The message was clear. The king had returned, and he would not forgive. And yet, beneath the cheers and executions, a question haunted the Restoration. Had Charles avenged his father, or had he simply poisoned the monarchy with blood once more? We're halfway through this brutal story. If you're still watching, you're clearly drawn into Charles II's twisted revenge. Do me a favor. Hit subscribe to Histoeureka. Give this video a like and drop your country in the comments. Let's see who's still here for the darkest parts. Charles II was hailed as the Merry Monarch, a king who filled his court with laughter, music, and mistresses. But behind the laughter lay scars carved by war, exile, and revenge. He had returned triumphant, his throne restored, his enemies punished. Yet vengeance was not a cure. It was a poison that seeped into his reign, shaping every decision, every smile. Charles had witnessed the collapse of monarchy once before. He knew how fragile crowns could be. The executions of Cromwell and the regicides were not just payback. They were lessons, burned into national memory. Every noble who bowed to him remembered the heads on spikes. Every courtier who toasted him recalled the stench of corpses. Fear, more than love, secured the Restoration throne. But fear also made Charles cautious. He distrusted Parliament, resented Puritan moralists, and sought pleasure as a shield against politics. He filled his days with gambling, wit, and women, yet he never forgot the axe. This duality defined him, a king of parties and playhouses who could still order dismemberment without hesitation, a monarch who laughed loudly but listened for whispers of treason in every hall. The philosopher Hobbes, whose Leviathan Charles knew well, had argued that fear was the foundation of order. In Charles's England, fear was not theory. It was spectacle. By desecrating Cromwell's corpse, Charles had turned vengeance into political philosophy. He taught England that the king was sacred, untouchable, and that rebellion would end in mutilation. But fear corrodes trust. Many Protestants feared Charles's Catholic sympathies. His secret dealings with France raised suspicions. Could a king who preached loyalty himself betray his kingdom for survival? Charles played a dangerous game of masks. Publicly merry, privately wary, he maneuvered between factions, always guarding the crown. His charm was his shield, but trauma was his sword. and the trauma ran deep. He had fled across Europe penniless, hunted, mocked. He had slept in barns, disguised himself as a servant, and seen allies betray him. Those memories never left. Every mistress, every joke, every mask at court, behind it was a man desperate to bury the sound of his father's execution. To forget that kings could bleed, could fall, could be cut apart, but no feast or mistress could erase the stench of Cromwell's corpse swinging at Tyburn. For Charles, vengeance had bought a throne, but at the cost of peace in his soul. The politics of blood created stability, but also paranoia. He ruled longer than Cromwell, but not without shadows, shadows that lingered even after his death, shaping the monarchy for centuries. For though Charles II restored the crown, he also restored its fragility. He showed England that kings could reclaim power, but only through terror, and terror never rules forever. The restoration glittered with masks, mistresses, and merriment. Yet beneath the silks and laughter lay a monarchy rebuilt on bones, a throne balanced on corpses swinging in the wind. Charles II had avenged his father, but the cost was steep. By ruling through fear and spectacle, he carved terror into the memory of his people. His vengeance defined him as much as his pleasures. The mutilated bodies of Cromwell and his allies were more than warnings. They were monuments. For decades, Cromwell's head leered from its spike, rain-washed, crow-pecked, until bone alone remained. Every Londoner who passed beneath it was reminded, rebellion ends not in glory, but in shame. The axe had cut Charles I, but Charles II made sure no blade would rise again unchecked. And yet, in securing vengeance, Charles revealed monarchy's fragility. For if one king could be executed, and another could desecrate corpses in reply, what did that say about divine kingship? England saw a monarchy both restored and stained. A king who danced, feasted, and seduced, yet who ruled from behind a mask of laughter, haunted by execution, obsessed with memory. The Merry Monarch was also the morbid monarch. His court may have been filled with pleasure, but his reign was always shadowed by death. The cost of defiance was no longer just rebellion in life. It was eternal dishonor in death. Cromwell's mutilation proved that the crown could reach beyond the grave. And still, the question lingers. Did Charles secure justice for his father, or did he drag monarchy deeper into blood? Did vengeance heal England, or curse it to repeat cycles of fear? When Charles II died in 1685, he left no legitimate heir. His brother James would inherit, but with him came new storms, new fears, and eventually another revolution. The lesson of Charles II remains unsettling. Power can be restored by vengeance, but vengeance cannot restore peace. It leaves scars that echo through generations. Even today, historians argue, was Charles II the savior of monarchy, or its gravedigger in disguise? A king who laughed through exile, yet could never laugh away the axe. His reign reminds us that kings are mortal, crowns are fragile, and vengeance is a fire that burns long after its victims are ash. If this story of Charles II's brutal revenge struck you, don't let it vanish into silence. Subscribe to Histoeureka and stand with us as we uncover history's darkest truths. Like this video, share it with others, and comment your country below, so this story of vengeance lives on across the world. Charles II's vengeance was grotesque, but his cruelty was not unique. Across Europe, rulers turned blood into theater, punishment into performance. If this story unsettled you, wait until you hear of the nobleman who lured children into his castle, only for their bones to wash up in rivers and their ashes to scatter in fields. A tale so monstrous, it makes Charles's revenge look almost merciful.